degrees. Yeah, they are.
Recorded. Here's the findings, but the recommendations are usually in the back.
Yeah, there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. That's usually what makes us wait. Financial standards, so.
Well, I just want to, because since we collect money, it's not feel like I need to know if there's anything we need to do.
The only thing that was what we sent to you about the approval, making sure that they
Yeah,
aren't,
we addressed.
where they can't reduce the ticket amount without your approval. And it's not that they thought that could, but you know how it is,
Well,
could potentially happen.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And we took the recommendations that you guys made and we will. Okay, great.
We'll begin the Easley City Council meeting for November 9th, 2020, 7 p.m. And I will ask our council person, Nancy Brazil, if she will open up with an invocation.
Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Lord, thank you for this life, health, and strength. Lord, we ask that you continue to bless us, Lord, with only that we know you can. Lord, we ask that you be in this meeting tonight as we conduct your business for the city of Easley. This is my prayer. In your son, Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the minutes as written. Okay, all right. Yeah, there are 3 sets of minutes, one for the work session, one for the regular meeting on October 12th, and one for the special call meeting on October the 2nd. November 2nd, yes. Hearing none, they stand written and approved. Reports from council members, Ward 1.
Mayor, only would like to say happy Thanksgiving early. We won't see each other until after Thanksgiving. And then in anticipation of Veterans Day, on Wednesday, I'd like to say a big thank you to all our veterans, those who served our country, and we're thankful to all of them more than we can say.
Ward 2.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just saddened to look on the internet to see that we're up to approaching 5,000 coronavirus victims in Pickens County from the beginning of the year. That's a sad number, and we've all been touched by this coronavirus throughout this time. But on a brighter note, I just want to very, very glad that Tommy and Matthew and Stephen, our city administrator, and Paula and Miss Nancy have had the virus and are over the virus and have successfully conquered it. And I also want to include our near-miss virus person, Jim Robinson.
Thank you. And Ward 3.
Well, I just wanted to let everyone know that I am still working on getting the committee together for the impact fee. I have spoken with the city administrator for Mount Pleasant, who is Eric DeMora, and he's given me some good information, which we'll bring forward at the appropriate time. And tomorrow at 3 o'clock, I'm going to sit down with Mr. Dykes and Michael Day and Chris Bradley with Home Builders Association in Greenville, and we're going to go over some of their data in preparation for having the committee meeting. So the meeting tomorrow is at 3 o'clock. It'll be here. We have advertised it if anybody wants to attend, but I was trying to keep it so that it was an informational meeting, so for me in particular, to keep up with all of the pertinent data that they've got. It's going to be numbers that I'm interested in.
Thank you. Ward 4,
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to back up what Mr. Garrison said. Thank you to all our veterans for we be living free like we are today. And this virus, please be careful during this. Received word late this afternoon that our brother fireman that's retired, Barry Bridges, is not doing really good. So let's keep in prayer for Barry. He's been on a ventilator, from my understanding, 3 weeks. And he had a bad day today. So let's keep in prayer for Barry and his family.
Ward 5.
Well, I just want to say that the same for everyone, to stay safe as you get together over the holidays with your families. Just be safe and take care of each other, and happy Thanksgiving.
Ward 6.
Yes, sir. Mayor Womack, we learned this past week that Gary Harris passed away, longtime Easley CPA and financial advisor to the city of Easley. And if you knew him, dedicated Gamecock fan, but want to extend our sympathy to his family.
And we did send something to his contribution for his long time. Thank you so much for that. Report from city administrator.
Just want to reiterate some things we talked about in the work session, since it is coming up on the holiday season, just some dates and events going on. We will have the Festival of Lights starting November 27th. This will be in partnership with the Hospital Foundation, where they'll be putting the trees and the businesses downtown. We'll do the city tree lighting on November 27th at 6 p.m. And we will also do, we'll have carriage rides on the 27th and 28th, that Friday and Saturday, from 6 until 9. I'm sorry, 5 to 9 downtown. There will be a cost associated with those. It is a fundraiser for the foundation, so we do encourage the people to come out. And it is Small Business Saturday as well, so to come out, support the small businesses downtown, support the foundation, and be here for the tree lighting and kick off the holiday season. We also will have Santa Claus here on the 27th and 28th, and he'll also be here the 5th, 12th, and 19th of December from 6 till 8. We'll put some more information about that, but really wanted to hit on those dates since they're going to be between now and the next council meeting. So we're looking forward to kicking off our festival season. You'll see decorations going up next week. So we're ready to start celebrating maybe a good into the year here that's been very tough for everybody.
It's time now for introduction of new employees, and I will turn it over to the fire department.
Hello, Mayor, Council. I've got with me new firefighter Noah Benton. I'm proud to introduce Noah because he's the second new hire for me as your fire chief that came through our junior firefighter program, our volunteer program. And then Noah enlisted and served his country with the Army Reserves as a firefighter, and he started Monday a week ago with us as a new career firefighter. So it's encouraging to me that our programs are working and we're able to bring people on from within the department to make that work. And that was an initiative that the mayor started when he was fire chief. So I'm glad to see those things going on. Please welcome Noah.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, I'll turn it over to the police department. I think they've got a couple of new employees. They're still gonna sing, right?
They are. I had to get a soprano in here, so we worked on that. Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the council, I'd like to introduce the newest hires we've got. Some of them's been, this young lady's been with us for a couple of months now. So her name is Cheyenne Bailey. She's a dispatcher, and she's been working with us and learning the dispatch trade. This is Gus Samuel. He was in the military prior to coming to us. And I've got Mr. Alexander Hurden. Now, he's been with Pickens County Explorer Program through his whole career, up through his college graduation, so.
I was
he's,
there one time too.
Yeah. So he's been with it. But all of these are good people, and they're excited, and they're ready to get out in the fields and get started, and some of them's got some training, some of them's been out there on the street already a little bit, so we're excited to have them, and we want to introduce them to you guys so that you can see what we're gonna see out here in the street, who's gonna be winning the battle against wrong and crime. It's gonna be these, so I'd like to introduce them. Thank you.
Get the mayor in too. Yay.
Oh, do you? I'm trying not to.
So glad you're with us. Good, yes.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Okay, our next item on the agenda is Mr. Ken Meadows with Finney, is gonna do a audit report, correct? Is your mic on? Is it green?
I believe it is, yes, thank you. I'm Ken Meadows, I'm a partner with Green Finney. It was my pleasure to serve on the audit of the town again this year, or the city this year. Y'all should have the financial statements there in front of you. You've also got a copy of the governance letter that we provide. And then what I'll be doing tonight, the PowerPoint presentation that we usually go over that kind of summarizes the financial statements. So rather than flipping through the financial statements, we just go through a hopefully relatively short PowerPoint presentation and hit the highlights. So if y'all got any questions as I go through, feel free to stop me and ask me any questions. Or in the coming days or weeks, if y'all go through the financial statements and have questions, feel free to ask me, give me a call, email me or whatever, and ask me away, and I'll try to answer whatever questions y'all have got. So one of the first things you get when you go look at the financial statements is you get to the opinion, and the opinion kind of separates who's responsible for what and kind of notes who's responsible for what. So I just hit on that the city is responsible for your internal controls. We don't design internal controls. We come in there and look at your internal controls, but y'all are responsible for them. Y'all are also responsible for doing regular risk assessments to making sure that those controls are addressing the risk to the city. So I just want to mention that, make sure that y'all are doing that as a city. And then also mention that the financial statements, those are your responsibility along with the underlying accounting records and everything. Y'all are responsible for their accuracy and completeness and that they're proper. So our responsibility, if you look on the next slide, is to come in and provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. So just two things there. It's reasonable assurance. It's not absolute assurance. And then there's the concept of materiality. We don't audit every transaction that occurred with the city. We look at a sampling of transactions. We may look at transactions over a certain scope and stuff like that. So it's the audit's really designed for us to get in here, look at the material things that happened, make sure that those are proper, and not spend a lot of time looking at immaterial things which drive up the cost of the audit and the amount of time and effort it takes. So also I'll mention that it's not a forensic audit. So we're not coming in here to find fraud if it exists within the city. If it's a material fraud, we should catch it, material to the financial statements, but it's not a forensic audit. A forensic audit usually is much more focused on a particular area where you think you might have problems, and you also take a much deeper dive in those areas. So just want to mention that because a lot of times people hear oh, you're doing an audit, and they think that you're here to find fraud, and that's not really the purpose of this type of audit. And finally, if you read the opinion, we issued an unmodified opinion, so there were no modifications necessary. That's the best opinion you can get. That's the one that you usually get. So, next couple slides, I'll talk about the general fund, and then I'll get into the other funds and kind of go over those briefly. So the general fund, you'll see expenditures this year exceeded revenue and other financing sources by $1.9 million this year. However, a lot of that is due to debt issuances that happened last year. So you recognize the revenue last year when you did the debt issuance, and then you spend the money this year, that's an expenditure. So that's really what's driving that. You'll see that you had expenditures for the fire station construction and then purchases of a fire truck and a brush truck. So taking out the noise associated with those debt issuances and the related purchases or expenditures, expenditures exceed revenues and other financing sources by about $11,000. So you're pretty close to break even on a what I would term a normal operating. If you looked at it from a normal operating standpoint for the general fund. The fund balance in the general fund was $7.4 million. Of that, about $3 million is restricted for capital projects. That's unspent bond proceeds. That leaves an unassigned fund balance of $4.4 million. So that's really what you have to spend for general government or however, without any restrictions. So you've got about $4.4 million. With that, unrestricted cash at year end was $4 million. So, looking, just to give you a little bit further taste on the unassigned fund balance, it increased $129,000 from the prior year. And to kind of put it in reference to expenditures, it was about 25% of actual expenditures and about 29.5% of budgeted expenditures. So the GFOA recommends a minimum of 16.7%. That's about 2 months worth. So y'all are above that. Y'all are closer to 3 months. So that's what I would term a healthy fund balance. So, and you'd see over the years it's kind of grown. That percentage has grown. It took a little dip this year just because of the increase in expenditures. But overall, y'all, it's been growing. From a probably it was borderline unhealthy thing to a healthy thing over the last few years. So, just remind you why you want to have a healthy fund balance. One of the main things is just the cash flows. You collect property taxes at the beginning of the calendar year, end of the calendar year, so December, January timeframe. The fiscal year ends in June, so you've got another 6 months worth of operations to fund before you start receiving property taxes again. So you want, at June 30th, you want to have a healthy fund balance, which represents cash in the bank a lot of times, to fund those operations for the next 6 months. The other thing is, anytime you've got emergencies, unplanned events that happen, it's nice to have some money set aside for those. The other thing that you've probably experienced, or you get better interest rates when you do issue debt. Y'all issued a fair amount of debt or leases, and I'm sure y'all have gotten better rates because of your financial health. So, and it's just important, to have a good cushion given the economic times. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with COVID-19 and how it's going to impact the city. So, looking at revenues were $14.6 million for the year. You'll see you've got a pretty nice mix of revenues. $4.7 million in licenses, permits, and fees, $2.9 million in property taxes, and then $3.1 million in local option sales taxes, and then $2.7 million in franchise fees. Those are the major revenue generators. That's an increase from the prior year of about $500,000, and that was mainly due to higher licenses, permits, and fees of $326,000. And then local option sales taxes were higher this year by about $219,000. Looking at revenues compared to budget, revenues came in higher than budget by about $560,000 this year, primarily once again due to higher licenses, permits, and fees, and then also higher local option sales taxes. And those are other areas were under budget, which kind of offset those. So looking at expenditures were $17.6 million this year. You'll see how that breaks down. Most of it, as you would expect, would be in public safety, $7.3 million. And then you'll spend a fair amount in capital outlay this year, mainly due to the fire station construction and then also purchasing a fire truck and a brush truck as well. And then general government was $2.3 million and public works were $2.9 million. So comparing it to last year, y'all had a $3.3 million increase from the prior year. And like I said, that was primarily due to increased capital expenditures of $2.6 million and then increased public safety expenditures of $0.6 million. Or, yeah, I think that should be $1 million there. But anyway, compared to budget, y'all were actually over budget by $2.7 million. Y'all had a few unbudgeted expenditures. You'll see the unbudgeted fire station construction cost using the prior year general obligation bond proceeds of about $2 million was unbudgeted. And then y'all also purchased the new brush truck using, I think it was lease proceeds. That was unbudgeted as well, of about $214,000. So the remaining overages were experienced in the fire department, the public works department, and then just general government as well. So that kind of covers the general fund. Kind of give you a quick overview of the other funds. Community Development Fund had a decrease in fund balance of about $56,000 to $164,000, and all of that is committed fund balance. Revenues and transfers in of $268,000 in this fund that for the current year included a FEMA grant for $136,000 for a new fire station exhaust system. The expenditures included putting that exhaust system in for about $152,000 and also fees to various various studies, including the impact fee study in urban design and planning. So total expenditures were $346,000. And if you look at the what I would term the balance sheet for this fund, you would see that the rehabilitation loans receivable is probably the most significant balance on there, and that's $669,000 at the end of the year. The TIF fund had a decrease in fund balance of $357,000 down to $174,000. You'll see revenues decreased $178,000 down to $220,000, primarily due to the town and country TIF expiring. And so now those funds now flow into the general fund and no longer the TIF fund. And then expenditures were $577,000. That's a decrease of $770,000. And those expenditures were primarily due to spending down the TIF bond proceeds that from the prior year, I believe, of $430,000 for projects around the downtown TIF district. So that's one where you see a big decrease in fund balance, but if you looked at last year or when that bond was issued, you would have had a big increase in fund balance. So in this fund, you're just kind of spending down that bond. Looking at the hospitality tax fund, you've got $5.8 million in hospitality tax fund at year end. Most of that, $5.3 million, is restricted for capital projects, and that represents unspent bond proceeds that you have for that. You issued a hospitality revenue tax bond, so you've still got some money left for that, $5.3 million. You also had money set aside for debt service of about $400,000, and then you've got about $100,000 restricted for recreation and tourism related expenditures. That's a net decrease in fund balance of $1 million. In the current year, revenues were $2.4 million, which is pretty comparable to the prior year. And then expenditures were $3.3 million, and $1 million of that included spending down prior year bond proceeds. You'll see most of that was spent on capital outlay of $1.2 million. The normal recreation and tourism expenditures of $1.3 million were funded by normal hospitality tax funds. And then You also paid off the 2013 hospitality tax fund this year of about $500,000, and then other debt service on other hospitality tax fund bonds and capital leases of about $400,000. So that's that. And then the final fund that you've got out there, the stormwater fund, it's got a net position of almost $2 million. Most of that would be invested in capital assets of about $1.8 million. You've got a small amount restricted for debt service, and that leaves an unrestricted net position of $163,000. That's a slight increase of about $58,000 from the prior year, just due to more, the current year operating income. So, and then at year end, you had unrestricted cash there of $160,000 in that fund. So that's a quick overview of the funds. If you look at the government-wide statements, which are at the beginning of the financial statements, those are the ones that combine all the funds, put them together, add in the capital assets, add in your debt, kind of view the city as if it were a business on the same basis of accounting. And on that, you would have assets of about $45 million. About $29 million of that would be capital assets, and then you'd have about $14 million in cash and investments. And that includes both restricted and unrestricted cash and investments. That would be offset by, if you look down at liabilities, of close to $40 million. You've got about $18.8 million in long-term debt outstanding. And then you've also, this is an accounting thing, $13.7 million in a net pension liability. And that net pension liability is basically the allocation of the state's retirement fund. They're in a huge unlimited a liability position down there. So, and they allocate it to all the cities and municipalities and SPDs and other people that participate in the plan from an accounting standpoint. So you record that on your books. But it's strictly an accounting thing. It's not legally owed to the pension. It's not really a liability that you've got to fund. It's more of an accounting thing, just to show that you're allocating a portion of that, your allocation of that. So the other thing there, the other big liability you've got is about $5.4 million in OPEB liability, your post-employment benefits, mainly retiree health care. That's about $5.4 million. That's an unfunded liability, but it is a liability of the city. So, looking at your net position is $8.2 million. That would be the equivalent of equity, and you'll see that $19 million of that would be invested in capital assets. You'd have about $1.4 million restricted net position, and that'd leave a deficit of $12.2 million. And you'll see that deficit is primarily driven by that net pension liability. So if you excluded that, which how it used to be before they passed this accounting standard, you would have had a positive $1.5 million net position. So always like to mention that. Revenues, you'll see if this was a business, would have been about $18.4 million. Expenses would have been about $20.5 million. With $1.5 million of that being depreciation. So that's a quick overview of the financial statements. Oops, oh, I hit the wrong thing. Well, here we go. Just capital assets, to give you a quick overview of capital assets. They were about $29 million this year, an increase of about $2.6 million from the prior year. You had about $4.1 million in additions. You'll see the big ones there being the fire station and the operations and maintenance facility. Both of those combined had about $2 million worth of additions. You bought a new fire truck for a little bit more than $500,000. The railway fence out here was about $274,000 this year in additions. Then you also bought a brush truck for about $211,000. Those are the big things. Then various other vehicles and equipment and other capital assets make up the balance of that. Offsetting those additions were depreciation of about $1.5 million. And then work continues on the fire station and the public works maintenance facility, as I'm sure you're aware of. Y'all got about $6.5 million in commitments on those two projects at year end, which will be funded with proceeds from the 2018 general obligation bond and then the 2018 hospitality tax bond, so. Let's see, yep. Debt, you'll see, just to give you a quick overview, I keep hitting the wrong button there, sorry about that. Was $18.7 million, almost $18.8 million at the end of the year, an increase of $25,000. I did have some new borrowings this year, $425,000 for a new brush truck and a leaf truck, which was purchased after year end. $566,000 lease for the new fire truck, and then $70,000 for a new sewer cleaner. Offsetting those borrowings were principal payments of a little bit more than $1 million, almost $1.1 million. And then just note, y'all had some subsequent debt issuances to year end. Y'all had the stormwater revenue bond for about $790,000, and then a GO bond, refunding bond for $903,000. Y'all refunded an existing general obligation bond out there. So that gives you a quick overview of the financial statements. If you look at the management letter, you'll see it has the required communications to the thing. The communications are pretty similar to what we've made in the prior years. I won't call your attention to really any of those. I don't think we need to discuss them. We did have a couple recommendations in here that you'll see in on page 4 relating to improvements in the municipal court procedures, and then also some recommendations regarding IT policies and procedures. So I'll let you read that as y'all wish. And then we've also discussed other things that arose during the audit, other recommendations with management as well. From a compliance standpoint, there were no significant deficiencies, no material weaknesses. From a control standpoint, things look pretty good. So, and y'all did not have a single audit this year. Sometimes y'all will have a single audit when federal funds expended exceed $750,000, but that wasn't the case this year. It may be the case next year. We'll see. So just in summary, the audit went well this year. I appreciate Joni and her staff and all the work that they do for us. As you've seen, kind of hopefully got a flavor from here, the city has a lot of stuff going on, a lot of bond issuances, a lot of lease things, a lot of spending those funds and everything like that. So there's a lot to audit and keep track of, and Joni does a great job providing us information on all that and doing the accounting for that. So you got an unmodified opinion. That's the best opinion you can get, and I think the city's in good financial condition as of year end. So that's it. If y'all got any questions, like I said, you can ask now or ask me sometime later. I also mentioned that if y'all, anything ever comes up during the year that you are concerned about or want us to take a look at as part of the audit, feel free to contact me. And when we come in, sometimes we usually come out for some interim procedures in the spring or summer, and then we'll come back out in the fall. So if you've ever got any concerns or questions, please do contact me, and we'll take a look at it as part of the audit, because we really work for council. So, we deal with management primarily, but we work for council. So we want to remain aware of that. So,
Any questions?
Well, Ken, it appeared to be a good audit. I'm pleased that the city is in good financial shape. I think that's good to have that much reserve sitting there at nearly 25%. I think that's speaks well for the department managers and for Joni for keeping us straight, and we appreciate you and the rest of the auditors for keeping us on the straight and narrow. Thank you, Ken.
Ken, is there a better or higher standard of financial condition than good? Or is good as it gets?
well, I mean, it's all relative. I mean, I could say very good, but I mean, it's all personal opinions. So, and I tend to be conservative. So, I mean, I think compared to where y'all were, say, 4 years ago, much improved. I mean, it's amazing, as we've since we served as your auditors, to see how the financial progress and just how the town has rebounded and everything like that. So I think y'all have done a great job as a city. I'm sorry, I'm saying town, but it's the city.
Very good, thank you.
I'm very pleased with all the department heads and the way they've worked together to achieve this.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you, Ken.
Do we have anybody wishing to address the city, any emails, no letters, no any, okay. So we will move on to item 10, unfinished business. This is second readings. A is ordinance number 2020-26 to amend the ordinance for the silos on Folger Avenue. Ask for a motion.
Motion, bring it to the floor.
Second. Second, Nancy. Okay.
Let me take care of it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we originally approved this ordinance, and that was to take a subordinate mortgage on silos, it being transferred according to lease with the option to purchase to the silo holdings. We learned recently that if we take a subordinate mortgage on the real estate, that it's going to interfere with their ability to get financing through Small Business Administration. So the attorney for First Citizens informed us that perhaps a better option would be to take a security interest in a controlled deposit, with First Citizens being the bank that's handling the loan. And so in talking with council, talking with the mayor and the city administrators, brought before you last week for a first reading for that to be approved, that we would take a security interest in the controlled account. Not that we'll ever get to touch that money should they default, because I think the bank would step in at that point. I don't want you to be misled on that. So, but a security interest in a controlled deposit is probably better than what would in effect be a fourth mortgage on the property.
And this is what we met on for the special call.
Special call meeting.
I just add to that, based on the investment they've already made and the investment that they will be making with this small business administration loan, I think the $50,000 set aside would make us feel better, but the amount of money they're going to have invested in this property is going to guarantee that they're going to meet the guidelines that we have set forth. I think the their loan agency is going to make sure of that.
Mm-hmm. Good point. I call for the question.
Call for questions. All in favor of this ordinance, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Show it carries. Item 11, new business ordinance, the first readings. It's ordinance number 2020-27 is issuance of some new bonds, and I'll turn it over with a motion first.
So moved.
Second. Turn it over to Steve.
So, last month you approved to do the refinancing on our 2018 general obligation bond to reduce our interest rate and refund that, and we approved that. Mayor and I did the closing, and shortly thereafter, and spoke to our bond counsel and asked them to, and our financial advisor, to have them look at our 2019 hospitality bond. And what we found is, even though this was issued a year ago, last January, February, I believe it's February of 2019, our interest rate was at 3.82% for 16 years, with an average annual payment of about $770,000, with the current bond set to be repaid in 2036. We went back to our bond issuer, which was BB&T, or now it's Truist Bank, see what they could offer us now that interest rates were lower. They were able to offer us a 2.06% interest rate, keep our repayment date and everything the same. This would bring our annual payments down by around $70,000 per year and save us about $1.15 million over the life of the current issuance. There will be about a $50,000 issuance cost, which is with bonds, because you have the legal fees, of closing, and the attorneys and everything to handle all of that. I will point, this is a lot of numbers, but the one I ask you to look at, one that's kind of shaded in the far right, that would be our annual savings that we would have per year over our current issuance. You can see they run around, average a little over $70,000 per year. And it would be 1.144 million and change that we would save over the life of the loan. So I think it's worthwhile to do the refinancing. I don't know, we were hoping we were going to get interest rates below 2, but we didn't quite get there. With the uncertainty with everything going on with COVID, we were actually surprised with it being a hospitality bond related to the sales tax that we could get this low. So I think it's a great opportunity to reduce this payment down about as low as we feel we can get it and do the refinancing.
Very good. So when would this happen?
First reading is tonight. Second reading would be at our December council meeting. And I think the goal would be to close by about December 15th because they can only hold these rates for about 40 days after they've been issued. So we would try to close as soon as we can after the second reading to hold the interest rates.
Understand.
Well, I'm pleased that we're looking at every way we possibly can to save money on these bonds. Gives us more that we can work with.
Any more questions?
Call the question.
Call for the question. All in favor for this ordinance, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Ordinance number 2020-28 to amend 4.1111, which is the sign ordinance for the city of Easley. Ask for a motion.
Motion to bring for discussion.
Second.
Second.
Second. Turn it over to you or Tommy. Either one of you.
He's out here. I'll hit the high point and then I'll let him answer any questions that you may have above just the high points, kind of like we did during the work session. Just again, as we discussed, council did adopt this ordinance back in 2010, gave it 10 years for compliance for signage. It outlined that heights for freestanding signs mostly was targeted at general commercial, which is Highway 123 and 93, to bring sign heights to 15 foot or lower over the time period. The ordinance has actually set that the compliance is to be done by the end of this year, or January 1, 2021. As we discussed earlier tonight, a vast majority of signs, we'd say probably over 2/3, have already come into compliance. And there are several that we're actually currently working with, trying to get them into compliance by the end of the year. However, as we discussed with some of the signage we have going on, it has been impacted by COVID. It's considered non-essential businesses, and a lot of them were shut down throughout the country for several months at a time when COVID spiked at the beginning. We are still seeing some delays, and we understand that restaurants were greatly impacted from indoor dining being restricted to having to mostly just go to drive-thrus and stuff like that, that there was some impact to businesses